Hello, welcome to the Living Proof Podcast. I want to first apologize for not being here last week. There was a lot going on last week. There was so much going on last weekend, and because of that, I did not have time to record, and so I did not make a video. And we all know the rest. The last week happened, and here we are. But not the point. The point is that this week is here. This weekend has come up, and I had to go to university retreat this weekend. It was really nice, a really good time to just take a break from campus and step into spending time with God, spending time with community, and spending time with the people around me, as well as just being away from all of this. I love campus and I love the people here. I love making these videos and I love talking to people about my major and classes and all that stuff. But every now and then it's just nice to step away and take some time to recenter your mind on God and recenter our minds on what we need to do when He's calling us to do these things. Which leads me into my topic for today, which is the topic of retreat, which is kind of staying on the narrow path, right? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will read a section from the Bible. It's Matthew 7. The narrow road starts at verse 13, but we're going to start in Matthew 7, verse 7. So verse 7 reads, "Keep on asking, and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be opened up to you. For everyone who asks receives. Everyone who seeks finds. And to everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Your parents, if your children ask for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask Him? Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets." Verse 13. "You can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few find it." Right? And so, the whole retreat was essentially going over through that section of Matthew. We went through Matthew 7, Matthew 9, and Matthew 10, I believe. Or 7, 8, and 10. Or was it 7, 8, 9, 10? Just the span from 7 to 10, right? And essentially what was evident throughout this entire process was that Jesus is a good father. He is the representation of our good Father. And when He performed these miracles to the people, one that stood out to me that we just talked about this morning was, or not this morning, last night, was when the woman that needed healing, that was suffering from, I guess, chronic bleeding, she touched on Jesus' robe and she was like, if I could just touch His robe, then I would be made, I could be healed. Like, I don't even need to speak to Him. I don't need to see Him. I don't need to have a conversation. If I can just touch His robe, I will be healed. And Jesus noticed this when it happened, and He turned around and was like, "Go in peace, because your faith has made you well." And that's very powerful to me, and I hope it's powerful to you guys as well, because when we think about that, I don't know how many times you can go up to somebody and just sense their presence and sense that they are around. First of all, Jesus, like, nothing happened for Him to notice, and He turned around and noticed the girl was there based on healing power leaving Him. Like, He noticed He healed somebody, and He turned around and He was like, "Wow, your faith is so strong." Like, that's just, I find that kind of funny. Like, I imagine that you're just an infinite well of energy, and then all of a sudden you feel your energy go away for a little bit, and you're like, "Who touched me?" And you just turn around and see someone touching your robe. Like, I find that kind of funny. But the more overarching point of that is that Jesus didn't say, "Why are you touching me?" He didn't shun her away. He didn't say, "Oh, you need to do this, 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 and that, X, Y, Z to actually be healed." No, He said, "Go in peace, because your faith has made you well." And something that is so emphasized with the Pharisees is that your works are what get you to heaven. Your works are what you do, and your works are what pretty much save you, so to speak. I'd say I fall into this trap a lot, where I believe that my works are what make me who I am, whether it be through academics, whether it be through my friends. I feel that if I am not perceived by people in a positive light, either based on what I've done or based on what I'm going to do, then I feel as though I am not doing what I need to do. And in some sense that is true, but not for the reason that I'm elaborating on, and let me explain. I think that when we see how we are viewed by others, I think it is important to know that we are representations of Christ, right? how we should be an accurate representation of Jesus. We cannot walk around proclaiming his name, saying that we follow him, and doing the complete opposite, right? Verse 15 and onward reads, "Beware of false prophets who become disguised as harmless sheep but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, you can, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions." And notice how it doesn't say, so as a fruit determines a tree's existence, so does your actions determine your existence. It doesn't say that. It says you can identify a tree by its fruit, and you can identify a person by their actions. Identifying someone by their actions and having your actions be your identity are two very different things, and they seem similar, right? You would think identity based on actions and identity because of your actions, like that sounds pretty similar. But identity based on actions is my identity because of what I do. Like me playing volleyball every day would be my identity if that were the case. But the latter is that my identity is an indication, or my actions are an indication of my identity, right? Me playing volleyball every day, in one aspect you could say, okay, this guy plays volleyball, he's a volleyball player. Me playing volleyball every day in a different light could be, this guy really cares about his health and his physical well-being, and as a representation of that, as a result of that, he goes and plays volleyball every day. So on one hand, you have your identity being determined by your actions, and on the other hand, you have the actions being confirmation of your identity. And so Jesus is calling us here to have our actions that are in line with our identity, that are a confirmation of our identity, not so that we can say, okay, our life is solely based on what we do, and if I'm not doing good things, I'm not a good person. That's not the point. The point is that the faith should come first. The faith that we should have, like the woman had, should come first. And since our tree, the faith is essentially the foundation. It is the root. The root will grow a good stalk, a good tree, right? And so the fruit that grows off of that tree, if you have that faith, if you have that good intention of following Christ and being like him, the fruit that you produce will be indication of that, and it will be good fruit. If you are trying to be a good person based on your own works and based on the values of the world and trying to be morally right in other people's eyes, your roots will not be as good as they could be. They will not be from Christ. You will have a bad tree. And like it says later in Matthew, Jesus will say, "Depart from me, because you never knew me. You cast out demons in my name and prophesied in my name and performed miracles in my name." But it wasn't me as the root of that tree. You were doing these works and thinking that's what made you right with me, instead of trying to have faith, having a relationship with me, and doing these works as an example of what your relationship with me looks like. And that was something I was thinking about the entire weekend, because it's so easy to think that just because I'm praying every day, just because I'm reading every day, just because I'm spending time in community, and just because I don't go around slandering people around me, just because I do all those actions, that means I'm right with God. But that's not always the case. You can have good fruit that wasn't produced from your tree. You can hold fruit in your hand and say, here's the evidence of my life. But if your tree is bad and you're hiding it behind your back, that's not an indication of anything. You can have fruit all the day long and never have an actual relationship with God. You can do everything a Christian can do and never have a relationship with God. And I find that so very evident in this world, because there are Christian values like, let's say the very, very, very common phrase, right? Love your neighbor. Loving your neighbor is a very flat phrase. You can't really misinterpret it. It's just love the people around you. Love the person that's next to you. Love everybody on the planet because they are your quote unquote neighbors, right? And I would say that's a pretty universal theme for most people that have good morals outside of Christianity, and most people that are Christians, right? They would probably agree on loving your neighbor. But that doesn't mean they have the same motivation for doing it. Someone could love their neighbor because they're a good person or it's the right thing to do, blah, 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 versus someone loving their neighbor because they know how their value in Christ and they know their value as a being that was created in the image of God. And so they're going to treat them right because, one, Jesus has indicated why we should treat them right, and two, because it brings God joy and it brings him glory to know that we are following in Jesus' footsteps, right? There are two different paths of motivation that lead to the same result, which then leads to my whole point of the narrow path and the broad path, right? The broad path is very comfortable and it's very wide, But we all know in the end that it leads to destruction, right? If I'm going down, let's say, for example, I'm driving down a road, right? And it's a very giant highway. There's like 8 lanes both directions. Let's just imagine this, for example. Driving down this highway, if you have 8 lanes per direction, you're going to have a pretty easy time driving around as long as people aren't causing traffic. You can go to whatever lane you want. You have freedom to get off the highway, get on, blah, 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 right? And God calls us off that broad highway onto a narrow, maybe 2-way street, 1 lane each side, that may not always be flowing, may not always be busy. There may be traffic. There may be bumps and potholes along the way. There may be things that cause us to want to get off at every twist and turn and nook and cranny. But ultimately, that single path, that narrow path, that hard to maneuver path is the path that leads to life. Whereas the highway, as it says here, right? Where is it? The highway to hell is broad and its gate is wide. Or, in other words, in Greek, the road that leads to destruction. The highway to hell is the road that leads to destruction, right? And so if we're looking at this from I'm not going to say holistic, I don't think that's the whole word, but I'm going to use that to look at the whole picture. If we're looking at this from a holistic view, we have a giant road that leads to one bad place, or a small road that leads to an infinite good place, right? And so it's pretty much just determining what you want to live like now, and that will determine your future for later on. It spoke to me this weekend because as I was thinking about my life, I often sometimes choose the broad road. I will choose God in situations where it's comfortable. I will choose God in situations where it's easy. And I wouldn't say I'm completely on the broad road, but I wouldn't say I'm completely on the narrow one either, at least as of right now. God has changed my life, yes, and I've been transformed, renewed by my spirit so that I can follow him and be a better person than I was before. But that's not indicative that I'm always on the right path, right? I fall down and I get tempted by the things of the broad path. I get tempted by the things that are on that main highway, the things that look so easy, the things I see on other people's social media and other people's lives. It looks so simple and so much easier to manage than what I'm going through. But that's exactly how Satan wants to frame it, right? We read in John 8:44 that Satan is the father of lies, and he doesn't even know how to tell truths. His native language is speaking lies. And so when we see everything else going on in people's lives from the world, we are tempted to think that their life is all sunshine and rainbows, that their life is peaceful, that there's no strife and struggle going on in their life. But we don't know that. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And a good example of this is couples, right? We see couples on social media, couples all the time. And there are a good chunk of them that fall out and still post together because that's the only way they make money, right? And so that's their income, to post on a family channel or a couple channel. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're having arguments, they're having fights and things that we would never imagine, until all of a sudden their account is messed up or they have decided to split or something of that nature. And that's the same way how it is with Satan presenting the world to us. He presents all the glitter, all the gold, all the fancy things, all the items of this broad path, and we just get allured by it. We get tempted by it, which is it's human to get tempted by these things. It's human to get tempted by what seems to be so pleasuring and so great and so grand. But what is greater and what we need to be like is like Christ, who rejected these temptations after he spent 40 days in the wilderness, who rejected all of the sin and shame that was in the world, cast it away and killed it, burned it to die, took it to the grave, killed it, and came back to life, right? And if we can just encapsulate that in our day-to-day life and remember that in our minds, all of a sudden we'll realize that the broad path isn't exactly what it's meant, what it's panned out to be in the world. It's not this high and mighty road that everyone can get on because it's comfortable and easy and you'll have a success and fame and riches and all this. No, it is a path that leads to destruction, that leads to eternal suffering. And the narrow path, while it is difficult, while it is a struggle, it was never meant to be easy. God never said it would be easy. In fact, he warns against this in Matthew 10, I think Matthew 10:14 through the end of it, or Matthew 10 to the verse 42, and I think it starts in chapter 9 something. The whole entire time he's just talking about how we need to be aware of what will happen as disciples of Christ, how we'll be persecuted, how we will have to go to trial on account of Jesus, right? And all these things will happen, but those who endure to the end will be saved. Those who endure persecution will be seeing Christ one day. And it may not be saved in the way that we imagine. It may not be saved in living a peaceful life, but it will be saved at the end result being that we are with God and we have done well. And he can say to us, well done, good and faithful servant, right? That is the goal of the narrow path. The narrow path is not a goal to make ourselves greater and to boost ourselves up. That's what the broad path is. That's what the highway to hell, the road to destruction is. It's a way to make ourselves feel comfortable, a way to boost ourselves up, a way to give ourselves success, ourselves fame, ourselves power. The broad highway is all about you and your life in the flesh, right? However, the narrow path is about God. It's how we can give him glory through our suffering. It's how we can give him glory through our actions. It's how we can give him glory through our fruit. And it's how we can give him glory through everything we do. It's not just a matter of, oh, I'm going to walk with God for now, and then when I hang out with a different friend group, I'm going to turn around and cuss him out and do all this nonsense. No, it is a lifestyle that you never throw away and cast out, because the second you do, what does that look like? If I say I'm a Christian and I'm trying to give glory to God, and the second I end up in a different environment, people don't even know that I have fruits that are good, what does that look like? What kind of tree do I look like? Do I look like a tree that produces good fruit? Or do I look like a tree that produces the same fruit as everybody else in the world? We're called to be we're called to be the salt of the earth, right? And if I believe that, if I'm trying to live that out, I'm not going to be like everybody else. I'm not meant to be like everybody else. I'm not meant to be on the same path everybody else is on. Which takes me to another point, because your narrow path is not the same as everybody else's narrow path. I was thinking about this the entire retreat, the entire weekend, right? How my own situations, I sometimes compare myself as a Christian to other Christians. I sometimes compare the things I have to give up to the lifestyle of other people that I know that are following God, right? And I see the things they give up either for Lent or just in general, and it doesn't match what I give up. It doesn't match what I struggle with. It doesn't match my suffering. And sometimes I get trapped in that thought that since they don't struggle with these things, since they struggle with something different, but they don't struggle with my struggles, I shouldn't give in. I shouldn't do anything different about my life in regard to that struggle, because nobody else is suffering with it. So that means that it's not an issue that I need to address. Is sometimes the trap that I fall into. I think that because nobody else is getting addicted to staying on social media for 5 hours at a time, it means I shouldn't have to give up social media because nobody else is doing that for their Christian walk. But my narrow path may be dealing with social media addiction. Someone else's narrow path may be dealing with drug addiction. Someone else's narrow path may be dealing with family loss. Someone else's narrow path may be dealing with academic struggles. Someone else's narrow path may be dealing with relationship troubles. Like, there is so much variation to where God calls us, but it is always a narrow path that we have to walk down, because there is no other route. There is no other way we can get around this path. There's no other bump we can step across. There's no way to avoid these bumps, as opposed to just following Jesus and living the life he's called us to live. And that means getting hit with potholes. That means getting hit with stumbles and trips and falls. But if we're sticking to Jesus, if we're following him, if we're not producing bad fruit on the weekends and producing good fruit on the weekdays, then we will be able to withstand those falls. We will be able to withstand those stumbles and those troubles and those trials, right? Something that I was making a silly analogy about is me and my brother. My brother, I don't know if this is very accurate. Well, again, it's perception. Like, you never see what goes on behind the scenes. I always see that he sometimes scrolls reels. Not sometimes. He scrolls reels every now and then, either just around or whatever. And I see him watching videos too, but I always see him on reels and he's like scrolling reels for like 10 minutes or something. And I'm like, since he can be on reels, I shouldn't have to give up reels, because he's a Christian, I'm a Christian. We live pretty similar lives. I don't see why I shouldn't have to give up something he's not giving up, because I look up to him as a role model. And so that kind of thought process tracks in my head. Whole time, I'm the one that I sit on there for 10 minutes. I don't get off. I sit on there for 30. And then I sit on there for an hour. And all of a sudden, 2 hours have passed. I'm going back and forth between that and homework. And it's like, if I can't control myself, then sometimes I have to give up things that my brother is not giving up. Or I have to give up things that the people around me are not giving up, because it is different for me than for other people, as opposed to what I have to suffer with. No disciple suffered the same way, and no disciple had to give up the same thing. If we look at the story of the rich man in the Bible, he had to give up all his riches. And yet someone else asked in Matthew, Lord, I have to bury my father. And Jesus was like, let the spiritually dead bury the dead. So he had to leave his father behind and not bury him in order to follow Jesus. So one person, it was their family. Another person, it was their possessions. If we If I was the guy that had to give up my possessions, and I look at the guy that had to give up burying his father, oh, he has to bury his family to follow Christ, but I don't have to do that. Or I don't have family to bury, and I'm not struggling with that, so that means I don't have to give up my riches because he doesn't have to give up his riches. And we use that correlation between me and myself and another Christian when that's not necessarily how it works, right? God is not calling you to walk down the same narrow path. Otherwise, it would be a broad path. If we think about that, like, let's think if there's a highway that multiple cars can go down, or if there's a road that multiple cars can go down, it's no longer a road, it's a highway. Because if all cars are at the same spot and they're driving in the same distance in the same direction, they're going to be on the same road and there's going to be multiple lanes, right? And so if we think that we are going side by side with another Christian, if we think that we're going on the same route as another Christian, all of a sudden our one-way path turns into a two-way path or a two-lane path. And our two-lane path, if we meet other people, turns into a four-lane path. And a four-lane path turns into an eight-lane path because we meet more people. And all of a sudden we think that we're struggling with the same things, and so we do the same things. And even though God's calling us to be separate, God's calling us to be unique, and God's calling us to be fasting from certain things, to be leaving certain things behind as different seasons come about. Now, I'm not saying you won't struggle with the same things as other Christians, right? I think it's a fair assessment to say that all Christians struggle from lust. I think it's a fair assessment to say that all Christians struggle from pride, from greed, from envy, from the 7 deadly sins, for sure. And a lot of other people suffer from different things outside of that, right? Like some people could struggle with lust in the sense that they can't give up masturbation, and other people could struggle with lust in the sense that they can't stop watching porn. And while one correlates with the other in a sense, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to have to give up the same things. Let's say one could be addicted to masturbation and another could be addicted to actually having sex. And while they are the same and similar, you could rationalize, oh, I'm not going to have sex with somebody. But then you go end up masturbating, and then all of a sudden it's the same thing over and over again, right? And so because he gave up masturbation, I don't have to give up sex. And that's not what God's calling us to do. He calls us to not be sexually immoral. And that includes masturbation. That includes fornication. That includes sex before marriage. That includes just lust in general and adultery as a concept. Like all of that is included in not being sexually immoral. And so when we think about that, we may struggle with it in a way that's different to somebody else. That doesn't mean we have to give up the same way they give it up. I've never seen somebody that is doing Lent and they're doing it the exact same way as somebody else. Now, I've heard people give up social media. Multiple people do that. I've heard multiple people give up, food, I guess. They fast from food. And they don't have a certain food for a while, or don't have sweets, or blah, blah, blah. And they have the same kind of idea, but they never go about it the same way. There are different methods that they use to accomplish the same thing. There are different ways they are called to accomplish their Lent. And that's kind of my point, right? When we go down our narrow paths, when we go down our individual routes, there's never going to be a time where your method may always look like somebody else's method, right? You may have similarities, but God will always call you to do something that is specific to you because it is your relationship with Him. It's not your and Jerry's relationship with Him. It's not your and Martha's relationship with Him. It is your relationship with Him. It's you and God. It's not you and God and James. It's not you and God and Larry. It's not you and God and Jake. It's not you and God and Elizabeth. I'm just trying to think of names. But it's not you and God right? It's just you and God. And so when you look at your walk, don't pay attention to what other people are doing. Don't pay attention to what other people are doing on their narrow path, because they're over here on their own little road, and you may be able to see them, but you're not walking the same path as them. You don't see their steps. You don't know what steps they're taking. And you shouldn't look at the steps they're taking because your path is different. They may be going up a hill right now. Are you going to start looking for a hill to go up so that you can match them in their pace? No, that's just silly. If I'm hiking on a trail and I see somebody going up a hill that's in front of them, I'm not going to go try and get on their same hill or go find a hill to get on. I'm going to keep walking on my specific path because I have a path that goes to where I'm trying to hike to. And so if I know that God is leading me down the right path, if I know that He's at the end of this path and so is eternal life and so is the reward that He's promised us, then I'm not going to look to somebody else's path and be like, well, they're doing it right and I'm doing it wrong, so I should go follow them. Then all of a sudden, it's not about you. It's about them. It's not about God, I should say. It's not about you anyway. It's not about God. It's about the other person. When you start following them instead of following yourself, you start following their actions. You start following their Christianity. And all of a sudden, you make a religion around a person that's just trying to follow Christ. Essentially, It's like if Paul were sending me letters and I was trying to do all these things for Paul's sake instead of doing it for God's sake, who he's writing to me about, right? The wrong mentality to go about it is to be like, oh, I care about Paul. Paul is calling me to do these things. So I'm going to listen to Paul and be exactly like Paul and honor Paul and care about Paul and not even have God in the equation. Like, no, that's not the point. Just because you know Paul is a good Christian doesn't mean that you should do everything he does to be a good Christian. Because where do you think he gets it from? Where do you think he gets his Christianity from? Where do you think he gets his strength from? Where do you think he gets his motivation from? Because I promise you, he does not get it from himself if he is a good Christian. If he has good fruit, if he is a good tree that produces good fruit, he does not get the roots from himself. He gets it from God. So if you're following your own path, that is going to happen regardless. And you're going to realize that over time, you'll be a good tree that produces good fruit. Another thing that stood out to me is just, I think, let me find it real quick. My brain is not working. It's been a long weekend. I think the next section, which I was talking about, 21, not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father will enter. On judgment day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and performed many miracles in your name. But I will reply, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rain and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. I always reference that section and Psalm chapter 128. Because at the beginning of Psalm 128, it goes, unless the Lord is building my house, the house is built in vain. Unless I am doing works with the Lord, the works are done in vain. And it's a very powerful statement, and it ties right in with the passage I just read from Matthew. Because if the Lord is not with you, your foundation won't be the Lord. And if the foundation is not the Lord, that house is going to collapse. And so if I'm trying to build a house without the Lord, I'm trying to build a house without good foundation. If I'm trying to walk a path without the Lord, I'm trying to walk a path with no light. It'd be like if this light, essentially, which I'm going to do right now, it's going to probably be bad later. But it's like if I was trying to record a video and this light was off, right? If I were doing this, then it's kind of hard for you guys to see me. It's going to do exposure compensation, so it might be bright when it turns back on. But it's kind of dark in here, right? I wouldn't be able to see, say for that light in the back. If that light were off, I really wouldn't be able to see anything. And it's like walking down a path without that light. I wouldn't know what I'm doing. I wouldn't know where I'm going. And I wouldn't know how to navigate it because I've never been down that path before. And I don't know what's going on. So how could I navigate it? How could I build the proper house if I don't have the right foundation? How can I walk along this path if I don't have the right light? And so I need that light on. It's so bright. Okay, it fixes. I need that light on because that light is what guides me down the right path. That teacher is what guides me to the right lessons. And that foundation is what allows me to build the proper house. And so when we walk down our narrow path, we need to follow God and not follow other Christians and not follow other ideals and not follow other morals. Don't follow what people tell you. Don't follow hearsay. Don't follow preachers that are telling you to do things because the Bible says so and because you should be afraid of the Lord. You should have fear of the Lord. Yes, you should revere the Lord, which is why you follow the Lord directly and don't follow him through other people's words. That's why you read the Bible. That's why you pray to him. That's why you worship him and develop your relationship with him so that you don't have to follow the walk of somebody else through their actions, through their words, and through their worship. If you base your entire relationship with God off of somebody else, that is not a good relationship. It'd be like if I had a girlfriend and I wanted to treat her right. So I look up videos on Instagram of how to treat a girl right. And I watch this one account every single time I look to do something. Every single time I plan a date, every single time I do something nice for her, I watch this one account and their videos tell me exactly what to do. I'm not living my relationship with my girlfriend. I'm living their relationship out through me and my girlfriend. It's like mimicry. It's like a cheap copy of the real thing. And so essentially your relationship with God, if you're following another Christian, will be a cheap copy of what you could have if you just focus on your individuality and your own path. I'm never going to have a girl and be like, hey, this video said that we should go out on this kind of date, so let's go out on this kind of date. You wouldn't outwardly say that because you would want to coin it as your own idea. And in the same way, if you're following somebody else, you're not going to realize it. You're not going to acknowledge it or recognize it. You're going to think, oh, this is my own relationship with God, and I wanted to get this idea myself, even though I got it from another Christian. So I'm going to be like, hey, God, I'm going to pray to you this way, and I'm going to worship you this way because I saw somebody else do it. And God knows our heart. He's going to know you're lying if you say it's your own idea. So you might as well just develop your own idea to begin with. There's no right or wrong way to pray to God. There's no right or wrong way to develop your relationship. Actually, that second part is wrong. There is a wrong way to develop it and a right way to develop it. The wrong way to develop it is develop it through other people. The right way to develop it is develop it through Him. And that looks different for everybody, which is why I'm saying there's not really a right way. There's a wrong way, but there's not really a right way for every conglomerate of people. God gives instructions in this Bible, and He gives guidelines for general practice and general following and general worship. But every situation, every struggle, every trial you're going to have to go through is different. The temptation of myself is different than the temptation of my roommate. The temptation of myself is different than the temptation of my brother. So it's going to be different for everybody. It's not even the same. I guarantee even the same revelations that happened on retreat. My revelations were not somebody else's revelations. And vice versa. So we can't say realistically that my path is going to look exactly like somebody else's, especially on the same walk. And we certainly can't say that my path is supposed to look like anybody on the broad path, because that's just completely false. You can't even make that claim. You can make that claim with the narrow path because you're both on a narrow path, but it's not the same path. In the same sense, but you certainly shouldn't make that claim with the broad path because you know that's different. And you can see the differences. You can see how their lifestyle differs from yours. And so there's no ground to make that claim, essentially. And so pretty much the point I wanted to get across today is that everyone's narrow path looks different. And so God's going to call you to do different things. And I got called to do something last night. And when I tell you I cried, I started to cry as my friend was praying over me last night because I knew there's this thing that happens when I come to the realization of what God is calling me to do. I think the emotions in my heart and the realization just overwhelm me so much to the point that I break down in tears. It happened in high school, it happens in college, and it happened yesterday. And those situations were just very powerful to me because I felt as though I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I just needed the strength from God to do it. And nobody else needed to do what I did last night. Nobody else needed to have the same realization as me. Nobody else that I know of had the same realization as me, because my own life, my own struggles, my own situations were different. My narrow path was different than everybody else's. Does that mean I cannot gain support from the people around me? No, as I just said, people were praying for me. So that doesn't mean I have to walk through it alone. That doesn't mean I don't get support. But that should mean that I should not base my life off of other people's. I should not base my walk and my faith off of other people's. I should base it off of what God says to me, what He's done in my life, how I've seen Him move, how I know He's going to move in the future, right? The faith of that lady that touched His robe, she didn't base it on what other people told her to do. I guarantee you nobody told her, hey, you should go to Jesus and just maybe touch His robe, see if that'll work. No, her faith was so strong, and she knew who Jesus was. She had that faith that when she came up to Him, she knew that just by touching His robe, the healing power would flow through her. She knew that for a fact. She didn't have to base it off of anybody else. She didn't have an Instagram reel tell her to do that. She knew based on God's character and what she's seen Him do before and his power that she was able to do that. That she was able to have that faith. That she was able to go up to Him and touch His robe and everything was made well. Your faith has made you well. That's what God said. And I feel like a similar situation happened last night. After I got prayed for, I went and did what God was calling me to do. And it was the same situation. If I could just do this, then I know God would heal me. And He did just that. And I promise you the rest of the night, I was not happier than I'd been for the past month and a half. So it was just, I was not happier for the past month and a half than I had been last night. I said that backwards. But point being, that God will call me to do things, and my faith needs to be there. I need to have faith in how God's moved in me before, and that will guide me on my narrow path. I'm not going to have the faith of another person. I'm not going to base it off another person. God wants us to go deeper with Him, and so we need to be deeper with Him. Not with people around us, not with my friends, I need to be deeper with God. And so that is what I'm going to leave with you with today. And that is what I'm going to meditate on this week. Just being deeper with God, intentional with Him and Him alone. Not anybody else. Nobody else determines your walk but you. Nobody else determines the way you live but you. So if you ever want to get closer to God, if you ever want to develop your faith, if you ever want to cry out to Him and keep walking along this narrow path, you have to be focused on Him. In the same way when you're driving, you have to look ahead. You have to be focused on what's ahead. When you're on this path with God, you have to be focused on who's guiding you. When you're driving with the GPS, you're not going to not focus on the GPS. You're going to be attentive to it. You're going to look where to turn. You're going to look where to go. And you trust that it'll get you from A to B. In the same way, how much more can you trust a God that has delivered time and time again and created you from the ground up, from the dust of the earth? He created all of us and gave us a life, gave us personality, gave us memories, gave us experiences. If He's been that good all your life and He's never let you down, truly think about it. He's never let you down when you truly relied on Him. Then why would I falter now? Why would I give up now? Why would I put my trust in something else now? Why would I not trust Him to guide me down this path now when I've seen Him guide me down every single small nook and cranny of a road that has happened before? It doesn't make any sense, right? So the logical choice, and what makes sense based on the Bible, is to trust in God, to give Him your life, to give Him your time, to give Him your energy, and to devote your energy to Him on that path. Because when you're on that path, then you truly understand who He is. Then you truly understand where you're going. And you truly understand how joyful it is to live for God. You're not living for other people. You're not living for other people's lives. You're living for God. And that is what is important. There is nothing greater. There is no greater commission than living for the Lord and making disciples. Like that, it's literally called the Great Commission. Go and make disciples. But we can't make disciples if we're not bearing good fruit. Because how can someone eat your fruit and know how good it tastes if you don't have good fruit? Think about that. Wait a minute. Because if we're good trees and we're producing good fruit, how can we make a disciple out of people if they're tasting our fruit and not tasting good fruit? If they're tasting bad fruit, they're not going to want to associate with us because our fruit is bad. Why would I want to follow the lifestyle? Why would I want to believe in someone who's motivating? Why would I want to plant a tree when I've seen the result of that tree? I've seen how bad it grows. I've seen how bad it tastes. Why would I want to plant the same kind of tree in my life? That's essentially what we're doing when we say we're a Christian, but we act badly towards people, but we don't act aligned with Christ. We refuse Him the opportunity of working in people's heart because they taste our fruit. They see that it is bad and they're like, Christianity tastes terrible. Why would I want to have more? You get my point, right? You get where I'm going with this? So if we want to make disciples, if we want to be like Christ, if we want to walk down this narrow path, we have to have good fruit. And this comes from the foundation and the roots of faith in Christ. Faith in God, faith that He can be who He says He is, that He is who He says He is, and that He can work the way He says He's going to work. Once we trust in that, everything else will be better. Everything else will be better. And yeah, that is what I want to leave you guys with today. My voice is about to go. I was yelling all weekend, and whenever I yell really loudly, it feels like I'm sick, even though I'm not sick. I think it's just a sore throat. So I might take some throat lozenges and whatever. But yeah, hopefully you all have a great rest of your week. Happy Monday. And yeah, stay blessed and stay on the narrow path. See ya. Why do I look like that? I look like a gremlin, low key. Ow! Why did my nail catch on my hair? How does that work, dude? It happened again. This is absolutely diabolical. Diabolical, bro. Diabolical. Why do I... Ew.